Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that set of challenges on logical assignment, and now we'll be moving into the switch block. Let's take a look. You can think of the switch block as kind of a conditional for multiple possibilities. JavaScript has sort of an alternate way of taking action based on values instead of just Booleans. So here we have 8 different regiments, and each of those regiments is supposed to get a different weapon. Each of the knights in those regiments needs to hold on to some different killing device. Let's say we had a knight constructor, and inside that knight constructor we were passed a name and a regiment in order to assign that new knight to a specific regiment and give them a name. Then we have this extra long series of conditional statements to check and see what the regiment value is in order to assign that knight the correct weapon. So if we made a new soldier variable and we assigned it a knight from the constructor, we would pass in, let's say, Timothy, and he should be assigned to Regiment 2. When we logged out this soldier's weapon, you can see that we would get the claymore. But in this code, it's kind of tedious, right, to type all of this out where you're repeatedly using if and else, and the processor has to repeatedly check the regiment value over and over again. We can use instead a cool JavaScript keyword that will jump directly to the right action to take. The switch keyword will allow us to assign a weapon based on a value itself, but without the Boolean check. First thing you do is place down the switch keyword, and then a set of parentheses which contain the value you want to switch upon. It signals to the compiler to take some specific action based on the value here of regiment. Now the switch block is going to contain multiple cases, and each one of those cases is going to be followed by one of the possible or desired values of the switched upon value, in this case regiment. Following that value, you see a colon. That separates the case and its value from the action to take. We're going to go ahead and fill in every single case here for our knight constructor. You can see each weapon is associated with a different regiment value. So now we feel pretty good about our switch block, right? So let's see what happens when we create a new soldier2 variable and assign to it a new knight from the constructor. It's going to be Richard, and his regiment is going to be 4. Now let's log out his weapon and we get, oh man, a morning star. What happened? What is wrong with our switch block? Something that happens quite frequently. Let's take a look. You can see in case 4, Richard should have got a mace, right? But he actually got the morning star, which is in case 8. Something unique happened inside of our switch block. The thing about JavaScript cases inside of a switch block is that they allow fall through to other cases. You have to think of the case keyword and its value as sort of this label that identifies the starting point for execution for the rest of the block. Now that fall through is sort of a vestige from the very common C language around which JavaScript is loosely based and has a relationship. It came about for 2 primary reasons. One, people wanted to be able to execute more than one case at a time within a single switch block, as well as the fact that they wanted to be able to have multiple case values take the same action. So we'll look at both of those useful situations in a bit, but for right now, let's take a look at this block and see what we can do to fix it. Now, as we said, once a case label has been selected by the switch block, all of the other labels that are inside that switch block are completely ignored because the switch jump on the value has already occurred. What that means for Richard is when his number 4 gets passed in right now, the switch block jumps to case 4 and assigns him the weapon mace, but then the case 5 label is completely ignored, and so he gets assigned warhammer. Then he falls through to case 6 and gets assigned the battle axe. Then to 7 gets the halberd, then to 8, and finally gets the morning star. So fall through can be a little dangerous, and we need a way to fix it. And what will fix it? The break keyword. The JavaScript break keyword provides a very quick exit from the switch block, and any block. Break will allow us to leave an entire block of code that contains it. In this case, we're going to use it for the switch. So let's space out our constructor here. We're going to shift things around and give ourselves a little bit more space. And inside each case, we're going to place a break keyword. Now, when we try to build our knight object for Richard and we pass in his regiment 4, we're going to jump all the way down to case 4, give him a mace, and break instantly out of the switch block. Since that was the only case that was taken, when we log out Richard's weapon, we get the mace, as we expected. Woohoo! We want to back up for a second because fall through kind of gets a bad rap a little bit out there in the wild. But it can be very useful, and we want to educate you on the uses of fall through. What if multiple cases, for example, take exactly the same action? We can creatively use fall through to make that happen and tighten up our code and make it more legible. Let's take a look at Regiment 7. What if we didn't want Regiment 7 to use the halberd anymore? We wanted them to use the Morning Star. Well, what we could do is completely remove all of the contents for case 7, including the break keyword, and stack it, that case label, on top of the case label for case 8. By doing this, we've associated all of the subsequent actions with each of those cases. Now you might ask, well, what if I wanted to move one of those earlier cases, say Regiment 4, who currently uses the mace, what if I wanted to make Regiment 4 use a Morning Star as well? Well, JavaScript doesn't care about your case order, so you can move around your numerical cases and place them wherever you'd like. Additionally, you can stack as many cases as you'd like on any particular set of actions. Fall through can often be useful if organized well. So how does that affect Richard? Well, if we made our new knight object using Richard and his regiment number 4, now you can see that he does in fact get the Morning Star because of that useful fall through we placed in our switch block. Earlier, you may have been asking yourselves, well, what happens when the switch block gets a value that's not actually present as a case inside of the block there? Well, we have a unique situation for that. If a case value doesn't happen to be there in this switch block, no action at all will trigger. So if suddenly we passed in Arthur and he's the king, well, there's no king regiment, right? So his weapon at the end of that object build would be undefined. That's because the weapon property is never actually set to a value. So we can fix that by adding another case. Notice here that this case for the king uses a string, and that's because a string is a perfectly acceptable case label. In fact, JavaScript will accept any value that happens to be matchable with what's passed into its parameter. Now when we call our new knight constructor and it happens to be Arthur and he's the king, we assign that result to the king variable and we log out the king's weapon, we get Excalibur, as we would expect. What happens if we've got a knight, but he gets assigned some regiment number that doesn't exist? Well, he's not going to get a weapon, right? And a knight that has no weapon sure sucks a lot. So let's see what we can do about that. JavaScript offers this default case to help us watch for unavailable values and do something specific when an unavailable value is encountered. We label a case with default, and inside there what we're going to do is just alert the armorer that this dude we're trying to make a knight object for has apparently an incorrect regiment, and we will not assign him a weapon, so that the armorer can make sure that we get him into a regiment where the right regiment number exists. So now, if we try to make a new knight object for this guy Jerome, and we try to pass in Regiment 12, of which there is none, the default case is going to be taken by the switch block, and the armorer will get a nice alert that says, yo man, fix Jerome, because that guy ain't got a regiment yet. You may notice on our default case that there is no break statement. What about that final break statement? Well, since no other case exists after our last one, there will be no other executable code inside of the switch block, so that last break statement is optional. A second usage of JavaScript fall through that must be tightly controlled but can still be very useful is that of hierarchical code execution. If you have a very carefully organized block, you can make all of least common properties be added first and all of the most common properties be added last through the switch block. Let's take a look. Here we have a ceremonial dagger constructor, and that ceremonial dagger is going to be passed to each knight upon their knighthood, depending on their particular rank. Here you can see that the length of the dagger is set to 8, and the owner is set to whichever knight is passed into the constructor. Now, the quality of the ceremonial dagger will be built based on the rank of the knight. So, if you can look at the bottom of our switch block here, you can see that we're giving the lowest level, which is just a regular knight, we're giving that knight 6 rubies on their ceremonial dagger. Now, the next rank up is going to be the captain of a regiment. Now, the captain of a regiment should have something special on their ceremonial dagger. You can see that our captain gets exactly 1 emerald. Now, notice there's a fall through here, meaning that the captain will not only receive 1 emerald, but since there's no break statement, they will also receive all of the rubies that a knight gets because of the hierarchy we've arranged our code in. The next highest level is the field marshal. This guy's going to get 4 sapphires. If you're a field marshal, you are sitting pretty. Not only do you get 4 sapphires, but you also get the 1 emerald of the captain and the 6 rubies of the knight. Above all of the field marshals is the single high constable, and this guy gets 2 amethysts on his ceremonial dagger, in addition to the 4 sapphires of the field marshal, the 1 emerald of the captain, and the 6 rubies of the standard knight. And if you are the king, the man, the myth, the legend, King Arthur yourself, then you're going to get 1 diamond exactly in the pommel of your ceremonial dagger. Not only will you get that diamond, but you will get every other gem assigned to every other level of military officer. So now let's make a new ceremonial dagger for Jerome, who is just a standard knight. Now, what happens when we call this constructor, it's going to jump straight to the correct case with no fall through at all before or after. Thus, all we're going to get is 6 rubies and no other gemstones. If we log out that knight's dagger object now, we can see that the length is 8, the owner is Jerome, and he has only 6 rubies. If I make a ceremonial dagger for Timothy, who happens to be a field marshal, and we assign that to the variable marshal's dagger, then what happens is the constructor gets the 4 sapphires for the field marshal, the 1 emerald for the captain, and the 6 rubies for the knight. And if we were to log out the marshal's dagger, you can see that we would have a length of 8, the owner's Timothy, and we got 4 sapphires, 1 emerald, and 6 rubies. Fall through allows that field marshal to acquire the lower ranked gems. Last but certainly not least, you can see that if we make the king's dagger for the man, the myth, we will get a diamond, 2 amethysts, 4 sapphires, 1 emerald, and 6 rubies for his majesty. Used in careful, controlled hierarchy, fall through can be very valuable, but you have to keep a close watch on it to make sure that the hierarchy stays stable during the maintenance period of your code. And that is the end of the entire Sword of Syntax level. We hope you enjoy these challenges, and we'll see you back in the next level. See you soon. Take 1 billion. Index 2 of the Swords Away. The Swords Away. Especially in, don't put that in there.
That's the first thing that's going on.
Yeah.